report is. And indeed, we agree that there is no shortcut for reporting at the present society. So welcome, Anisha Bedi on Democracy Dialogues Forum. We are happy that you have accepted our invitation. We have another eminent speaker panelist today, Ms. Bhasha Singh. Bhasha Singh is a she is socially engaged into various activities, but she is a senior journalist and a popular writer. She has received numerous awards for her contributions on the issues of manual scavenging and farmer suicides. She has authored a book, Unseen Shares from Horrifying Truths About Manual Scavenging in India. Her book on manual scavenging, Adrish Bharat, was published in 2012 by Penguin, first in Hindi and then by Penguin in English. Her journalism has focused on agrarian distress in northern India, the politics and ground realities of nuclear plants, and the Dalit, gender and minority rights. She earlier worked with Outlook, wrote for Outlook and other national media houses. And the area which she worked are very dynamic, and that is the reason that we have Bhasha Singh with us today. Welcome you, Bhasha Singh, on this forum of Democracy.
Thank you.
We have today a moderator with
We are not able to hear.
I'm sorry, I had to mute quickly. I am at home, sorry.
No issues.
Mr. Anand Maringati is a moderator for the day, for the evening. He is a geographer with PhD from University of Minnesota, and he has taught graduate courses at National University of Singapore and another University of Hyderabad, which is neighboring to us in Hyderabad. His research and teaching interests are on the questions of urbanizations, globalization from the South Asian vantage point. He is currently the director of Hyderabad Urban Lab, a multidisciplinary research program run by Right to the City Foundation. He has widely published in national and international journals on social movements, politics of development and urbanizations. And I personally recall Mr. Anand that he has been very actively working by his research and contributions. And I remember that he was a expert member in Sudhir Commission, which was a state commission on a study on socioeconomic conditions of Muslims in Telangana. And I realized that we are blessed that Mr. Anand has accepted our invitation today to moderate the panel discussion between Ms. Anisha and Bhasha Singh. All of you are welcome on this forum, and I hope that this is going to be very fruitful discussion today. Over to you, Mr. Anand, and the panel discussion may be started. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone from Democracy Dialogues, and I welcome both Anisha and Bhasha Singh. I'm familiar with the work of both of these writers. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. My job actually today is pretty easy. I'm just going to ask Anisha to start us off by telling us about what her experience has been, and then Bhasha Singh will speak following Anisha, and then at the end of it we will have a round of questions. We have about an hour and 15 minutes, so this is going to be a fairly rapid fire set of insights and questions, and then we will pick up those threads. I just want to say a couple of things before I let Anisha take over. This is a very, very difficult moment for a lot of us because the way in which what we geographers call scale, that is from the global to the national to the regional to the city to the household to the neighborhood, all kinds of scales have actually collapsed on us in one moment. So you sit in your house, you work from home, you look into your laptop, and you're looking at stuff that is happening across the world is having a simultaneous impact on you, right? And it's a moment when I can imagine being terribly, terribly difficult for journalists. It has been very, very difficult for ordinary people who don't have to deal with the morbidity, or he can switch off the morbidity at will if they want to. So I would really like to hear two things. One is at the scale of state governments, what is it that we are seeing? And the second thing that would be really, really interesting to see is what has been the experience of being a journalist trying to report in such an extremely complex and difficult time. So over to you, Anisha.
Thank you so much, Anand. And thank you. It's nice to connect with all of you through this platform. As I was briefed, I'm actually going to be talking about how various states in India have been responding to the pandemic. Of course, I'm actually going to try and focus on the key areas that I've been looking at closely, which is Delhi, where, of course, I'm sitting and participating from in this discussion. And apart from that, I also proactively traveled to the Telugu-speaking states of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh for nearly a month, 27 days to be precise, amid the lockdown. So that was quite a learning and a challenging experience. I could go on and on, but since we have a time frame, so I'm going to try and limit my discussion to how these three states actually responded to the pandemic, what are the various aspects they looked at it. And I think towards the end, I'll try and address what Anant asked me, which is about how challenging it's been for journalists to report, in these circumstances. So broadly, I think I'll begin with, I've tried to break this down into 5 key points holistically to look at how states have actually been responding to COVID-19, and then perhaps break it down and look at Delhi, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh specifically, since these are states that I personally visited. First, I think if for all of you who've been following the, for all of you who've been following this closely and going through the various news reports about the COVID pandemic, you would know this was about around, I think, 21st May, from what I recall, that the center actually retreated from an active control and sort of, took over a more advisory and a supplementary role in terms of combating, this pandemic, which is where the state-specific guidelines came in and which were dependent on a host of things. Of course, the geography was one of them. And, depending on the population, the various cluster zones or identifying containment zones, dividing them into red, green, and orange in terms of identifying areas so that contact tracing could be carried out effectively. So I think that was one of the first points in terms of where states really started playing a more proactive role in terms of how to deal with the pandemic instead of following just the national guidelines, as was the case prior to that. Moving on, I think according to me, the second and perhaps one of the most key aspects, if I may say so, of the state-specific response was, of course, in a developing country like India, was that of migrants, especially in places like Delhi, Mumbai, even Chennai, for that matter, Hyderabad as well, which are again hubs, IT hubs, and even other where there is a lot of employment. People from various smaller rural regions would come to sort of seek employment. So of course, migrants, formed one of the key core, if I may say so, reasons in terms of how the governments would respond to it, which is why perhaps initially we saw a lot of these states, there was an increase in spurt in COVID cases. And in fact, a lot of it is also being noticed now as there is this sense of reverse migration coming about. So that would be the second aspect. Third, I felt, I think judiciary has also played a relatively significant role this time, besides, of course, the apex court coming in the picture, which is the Supreme Court of India, right from March itself. If I recall offhand, because I was working on a story related to this topic, whether it's prisons across states in India, which are now developing, have come up as hotspots, where they've given guidelines, but even various district courts as well as high courts Delhi High Court has taken cognizance of various things, whether it's shortage of beds for COVID patients, whether it's exorbitant bills across private hospitals. Telangana, I can particularly share something I'll elaborate upon when I speak about the states separately, where the High Court not once, not twice, not thrice, but actually took cognizance 4 times and continues to, because the state doesn't seem to want to address some of the directives that have actually been given by the court, which actually amounts to contempt of court, but I guess nothing much came of that. So I think courts have also played a key role in terms of how states have responded to coronavirus and the management across the country. Moving on, which I personally think is the most important point, and which I personally have reported on very closely, is data transparency in terms of the figures available, the statistics, whether it's the number of cases across states, whether it's the number of deaths, the positivity rate, the fatality rate, so on and so forth. So that, of course, I think has been a point of worry and a key concern across, whether you speak to doctors, whether you speak to experts, epidemiologists, virologists. A lot of states have actually not been presenting data in a very transparent manner. And that, of course, can impact policy making in terms of how you're going to respond to the situation in a particular area. Because I think even people out there, when they're reading so much, given that we're in a time of digital news and everything's available, in the spurt of a minute, you would want to know which areas are reporting higher number of cases, the number of deaths gone up. So in a lot of places, and particularly in the states that I've traveled to, and even in Delhi, we've not seen a breakup of data presented in a very transparent manner. Delhi till date has not really been giving a district-wise data in their health bulletin, until very recently when the Sero survey results came out. Again, something I'll be elaborating upon very soon. So I think data has been a key concern in terms of how various states have looked upon responding to the pandemic. And I think connecting all of these is also the health infrastructure, something that India as a country has realized that much, much more needs to be done. I think the state of government hospitals, the way the health workers have been overwhelmed, overworked amidst all this. And while private institutes and medical care centers, hospitals have stepped in a lot of states, Andhra Pradesh, for example, being one, there are several other states where they've not been as cooperative and have charged such exorbitant fee, which perhaps a common man might not be able to afford for a COVID treatment. So I think health infrastructure, COVID as a whole has also shed light on, how our health infrastructure really needs to be worked upon, and something that we cannot really overlook in that aspect. So I think, these are broadly the points that I wanted to touch upon when I feel that we are talking about how states in India have responded to COVID-19. I would now want to begin with Delhi, which is something that I report very closely on. Delhi, as we all know, and for again all of you who've actually been reading about it, you would know that the headlines talk about how there's been a complete 360-degree turn in terms of the response. Just a few days ago, Delhi was on the second rank as far as the number of active cases is concerned. And if you see the newspapers today, in fact, the Chief Minister, in a detailed interview with the National Daily, has actually spoken about how we might be heading towards herd immunity, and it's important for the metros to open, and also in terms of how we've come down to the 8th position. Well, as a journalist who's been reporting on this very closely, I cannot deny that. Of course, the number of active cases has gone down, so has the mortality rate. Even the positivity rate has come down to a large extent. And the government, the Aam Aadmi government, which is in power here, credits the home isolation strategy for that. A month ago, you would go to any of the key COVID hospitals here, whether it's LNJP Hospital, Rajiv Gandhi International Institute, or Safdarjung. These were really overburdened and you could not find a bed. I mean, there have been numerous reports about how people have had to, had to be shifted from one hospital to another. Unfortunately, it's extremely sad. Some of them have even passed away in the process because they could not get timely treatment. Well, I think a month down the line, things have improved because I, for one, as a journalist, have done a reality check. And many of these hospitals actually have vacant beds. And I think it does go to the credit of the Delhi government that they also, in a short period of time, created extra facilities. We have the largest bed facility, COVID care center, which was inaugurated by the Home Minister, Amit Shah, last month itself, in terms of ensuring that there was no shortage of beds. So while some of those proactive measures have taken place, and even home isolation, where you have the option to quarantine, at home instead of being admitted, even if you have mild symptoms, not just asymptomatic patients, but also mild symptoms, has marginally helped improve the situation. However, why I still view this with a decent amount of skepticism, if I may say so, is again the lack of availability of transparent data to sort of corroborate what a lot of these government officials are claiming. Why I say so? Well, one, the number of tests, of course, here have been, marginally, not marginally, in fact, increased manifold. But just to give you all a brief, who are not very familiar with the topic, rapid antigen tests are those which are conducted to scan the level of antibodies in a human being. Those, as opposed to the RT-PCR test, which is the gold standard, as has been approved by the ICMR and various, international health organizations, the WHO, in terms of detecting the infection or the extent of corona, the virus in your bodies. The rapid antigen tests have been not only double, but perhaps triple the amount of RT-PCR tests that have been conducted in Delhi. Now, if you all know, rapid antigen tests are not the most reliable. There could be cases where a person who does have the virus, who is infected, does not get positive, does not get tested positive in the first go. So, which is why I feel that the numbers there are have a peculiar story to tell us, because had the RT-PCR tests been conducted in as much amount, then perhaps I think experts or people like us who've been reporting it very closely would feel slightly more confident in terms of this, complete change in situation in the national capital. So I think that's one of the concerns. Also, there is not enough data that's being put out, as I mentioned earlier. Only until recently, the Sero survey results came out, which actually depicted that 27.8%, so nearly 28% of people in Delhi are still infected. So if we calculate that roughly, 1 in every 4 individuals, in Delhi is vulnerable and has been infected by coronavirus. But if you compare this to the figures in the health bulletin, I would request you all, if you're really passionate about this, check out the health bulletins. It's available on the Delhi Health website. For those of you who are active on Twitter, it's actually tweeted by the Chief Minister's account every day. Only mentions about over 1 lakh figures, while if you calculate the Sero survey results, it should be about 40 lakh. So which is why I feel that I think more data needs to be put out there to corroborate what these statements about how Delhi's, improved and overturned the situation. While I'm not completely denying that, but I have my reasons for seeing that with a bit of skepticism. And last but not the least, as far as Delhi is concerned, I've also been reporting a lot on how the deaths here are underreported. Now, that's a trend that we've been seeing nationally, across the country, where the mortality rate does not seem to be very accurate. And this is a story that I broke back in May, where we realized that when we spoke to these COVID designated crematoriums across the national capital, the number of figures were not once, not twice, again, 4 times what was being shared by the government in their official health bulletin daily, which of course was worrisome. Now, again, the defense might be that while some of these are suspected cases, but as per the definition, they're supposed to be considered COVID deaths. So I think that's a debate that continues to happen, that while there are some suspected cases which are also considered COVID deaths, we cannot overlook the fact that even to date, so I did a follow-up of this story, and some of these stories are available on the print.in. So if you want to understand that in a more thorough manner, since I'm constrained by time, you can go check out those. Even today, the number of deaths are being underreported by 500 as per the investigation that we carried out. And these are confirmed deaths. The story that I did earlier included suspected as well as confirmed cases. But the story that I did as recent as last week was showing a variation of 500 confirmed cases. So I think this also sheds light on whether the various state governments are actually sharing data in a very transparent manner. Unfortunately, of course, I'm no expert to claim this, but I think from what I've noticed, COVID also seems to have become a political tussle for a lot of these state governments. While initially everyone was looking at it in a more holistic manner, from what I've been viewing when I step out in the field, it's a lot about showing low numbers, perhaps ensuring that we are performing better than our neighbors, than XYZ, XYZ state for that matter. And that's something that a lot of experts that I keep speaking to, in the process thanks to the profession that I'm engaged in, a lot of them tell me that perhaps epidemiologists and experts need to be more proactively involved by each state government, while carrying out this process, instead of the bureaucrats actually taking a final call on these things. So that's the feedback that I get from a lot of experts or doctors that I speak to. So that's at least as far as Delhi is concerned. Of course, like I said, the number of active cases and cases have reduced. The recovery rate has improved. But I do have my reasons as someone who's been reporting on the ground in terms of why I see this with skepticism. Now to move to the Telugu-speaking states of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, the length and breadth of which I traveled extensively from May end till June end for that matter. I'm going to, of course, draw a parallel between the two for obvious reasons. Of course, while Telangana is a smaller state in that sense, but a lot of people from Andhra also travel to Hyderabad. So that's a common reason that people in Telangana, or the government in Hyderabad, in Telangana, has been giving for the high number of cases. But I want to begin with Telangana has been actually a very, very interesting state to cover. Now, why I say that is because it's one state which had the highest positivity rate just soon after we started unlocking. And I can say that with confidence because I was there during these days. However, thankfully, off late, they have, improved their testing numbers, but they've actually been functioning in a very isolated manner on their own. Now, why I say that again, this is all factual, this is not opinion. The Telangana High Court has been repeatedly taking cognizance of, the state's low testing numbers, also directed them to enhance it, but somehow they've not really, for reasons best known to the government officials, chosen not to adhere to that. Until very recently, they were not even allowing private labs, private hospitals to actually test for COVID, something that is actually in violation of the ICMR, because the Indian Council of Medical Research has drawn out a list for every state for labs that are approved, by the research organization that can carry out testing. So now why a state government would choose not to allow that is something that would concern people out there, at least those who can afford testing, in private centers. Their defense, the government officials' defense, of course, would be that these private centers would charge an exorbitant amount. I did do a detailed interview with the health minister there, Mr. Itala Rajinder, who actually told me that, I don't feel the need, and I'm quoting him verbatim. Again, you can go read my interview, so I'm not making this up. Who told me that, courts are no one to tell us what to do. We're the state government and we know how best to handle it. Again, even if I view this in a very objective manner, I think that's contempt of court. But they've chosen to have this, for the lack of a better word, stubborn attitude or approach, approach while dealing with the pandemic. And the results are visible now because the numbers have really increased. We've already touched about 44,000 infections there. The fatality rate has also been going up. In fact, talking of fertility rate, for those of you, and I think maybe Anand, because he's sitting in Hyderabad, might be aware of this, that there's been a video that's been going viral on social media, which actually shows about 50 pyres, 50 bodies, COVID bodies being cremated in a crematorium outside a hospital. Something that people were taken aback about. And when it was corroborated, these deaths were not being included again in the Telangana Health Bulletin, which comes out daily. In a press conference very recently, the government health officials actually addressed this issue. And while they accepted that this perhaps was a backlog of cases, they still said that the data was being included and would be included in some period of time. But people who shot this particular video have actually claimed that this is happening on a daily basis, and there are at least 50 such bodies being cremated in the backyard of a hospital. So these are stories that that tell you that, again, I keep reiterating this, that data hasn't been very transparent as far as a lot of these states are concerned, and Telangana is another case study. Moving on, I think I also want to shed light on how the burden in Telangana has been limited to the nodal COVID hospital there, which is Gandhi Hospital, a hospital that I actually visited during my visit. And despite having a bunch of other primary health centers in various other districts, for, again, reasons best known to government health officials, they've limited COVID care treatment to Gandhi Hospital, resulting in a lot of dismay among doctors there who felt overburdened. Many of them have even carried out agitations, boycotted work. I even covered these strikes very closely while I was there, and they felt that why is the burden only being limited to one particular hospital? Again, I think the government chose to sit over it, and by the time they took cognizance, the problem, this infection had already spread to a large extent. Osmania Hospital, again, which is one of the largest hospitals there, of course, which also is a key example of the beautiful heritage of Hyderabad, for that matter. Again, there are videos that are actually flooded. Again, this sheds light on how health infrastructure has been in shambles. Some of these government hospitals haven't really been able to even ensure basic hygiene. So I think these are some of the things that stood out very distinctly when I was covering Telangana as far as COVID management was concerned. Of course, there are several other aspects as well, but I'm trying to limit myself to the health arena because, again, Hyderabad's an IT hub. So we've also seen a change of dynamics in terms of how work from home cultures become more popular, something, again, I reported on very closely. But I think I limit my discussion to the impact on the health sector and how patients have been able to cope with this. Also, now I want to step closely in, which is the last part of my talk, about Andhra Pradesh, which actually was performing much better, if we say, in terms of numbers solely, as opposed to Telangana. We began with high numbers in Andhra, then Telangana overtook, and then the neighboring state of Andhra Pradesh currently has a large number of cases. For a state which actually started with just about 5,000 to 6,000 cases till May end, now, as of today, has over 88,000. Now, that's a huge, huge increase. So much so that I remember when I was there, there were about 800 cases being reported on a daily basis. And as recent as just about 2-3 days ago, we've seen nearly 8,000 cases of COVID infections in a day. So clearly something's not working there. Although I would say that when I've interacted with government health officials there, and while I've visited several containment zones in the state, they've not been afraid to test, unlike Telangana. Telangana has not been testing very proactively. So obviously, as the sequence goes, if you test more, automatically the number of infections would be diagnosed more. Andhra Pradesh has been very vocal about how they're following the test, treat, and test, trace, and treat, approach in terms of ensuring that even if they diagnose a larger number of infections, as long as they were able to keep their mortality rate in check, they were all right. So I remember till about the second week of June when I was there, the health secretary was saying that we're prepared to handle about 40,000 infections already. They had prepared, so again, a contrast between Telangana and Andhra would also be that Telangana did not rope in their private health institutes as much, while Andhra has actually roped in private hospitals right from day one. So which is why you haven't really heard or you haven't really read reports of shortage of beds and so on and so forth in Andhra. Health infrastructure has relatively been handled better there, even though the numbers have seen a steep rise in the past fortnight or so. Another reason that could be attributed for these numbers is that as per the WHO guidelines, you're also supposed to test the dead bodies. There are people who might die of comorbidities because of other infections, old age. Telangana, despite it being a guideline, has again violated those and chosen not to test dead bodies. Again, something that the High Court there took cognizance of. Even the central team, the bureaucrats who went from the center and experts also took this up in the report that was submitted. However, like I said, Telangana, for reasons best known to them, chose not to really look into that. Andhra continues to test dead bodies as well. So of course, I think that also adds to their tally. But I think adhering to the lockdown there has been a key concern. From what I hear and from what I saw for myself, gradually as Andhra started unlocking, people perhaps there, the locals started taking it, slightly easy and started stepping out in larger numbers, weren't wearing their masks, which is why perhaps we're noticing the repercussions now for that matter. And I think this is also important because a lot of these states which actually were performing relatively well in the beginning, which I know is very subjective, have now started showing higher numbers because perhaps, it also depends on how responsible the citizens of a particular state are, how strict the government is while ensuring that social distancing measures continue to be taken very seriously. Andhra is again an interesting example in that sense. Now, again, you all must have heard of the very popular religious place of Tirupati, which was under a complete lockdown until 8th June, which is when it was reopened. Of course, they had introduced the concept of online tokens so as to ensure that there's no overcrowding that happens because people from across the country turn up there, for religious reasons and of course for their own belief and faith system. However, while initially things seemed all right, recently we've seen a large number of cases coming from there, so much so that it's actually been declared a containment zone by the district collector there. Again, something I reported on very recently. Even some of their priests have been infected by COVID. So that's something that, in fact, even there was an internal police report that I got hold of, which actually spoke about how perhaps the temple again needs to be closed down because, of course, there are so many people turning up there, which is leading to a spread of infection. Clearly, that hasn't happened, but we've seen the area being converted into a containment zone. So like I said, that unlocking also has its own adverse repercussions for every state. But I think it depends on the response or the, in how much time or how proactively a state government responds to it, which is when I want to quickly bring in Mumbai or Maharashtra for that matter. We all know that Dharvi, which is, the largest slum in Asia, was reporting a large number of cases again till about a month and a half back. But we've seen how the local municipal corporation there, the BMC, has played a very proactive role in terms of ensuring that even though they were deprived of proper dispensary, proper healthcare system, even healthcare workers, shortage of resources was a big concern there. There is a population of a large number in terms of people actually, hundreds had to share one common toilet. So you can only imagine if one is infected, the infection is bound to spread at a very fast rate. But which is where I think the governments reacted, the municipal authorities did not sit over it for too long. We also saw a lot of health workers step out in real time, carry out testing as well, something that's actually been recognized by the WHO. And Dharvi is actually a case study which is being given, as an example in other countries as well, in terms of how to overcome the situation. So it's not like if there's a state which has been severely impacted, you cannot overcome that. So, yeah, I think those are some of the aspects that I noticed in terms of the stories that I did from there. Yeah, I think, and also last thing that I'd like to mention about Andhra is that Srikakulam, which is another district there, which did not see any case for the longest time, for nearly 2 months into the lockdown, now has so many cases. 2 of the MLAs there have tested positive, that a lockdown was announced by the local government there. So I think some of these have been interesting examples to look at in terms of, just because a particular area is not reporting any particular case does not mean that the situation cannot turn around and things cannot change drastically. I think I've given you some examples to corroborate that. So I think this is briefly, I want to touch upon the states that I've visited. If any of you have questions later on from other states, I'll be happy to try and respond to them, but I wanted to limit my discussion to the ones that I had visited. As far as mental health is concerned, I think I come to that later because I don't want to eat into Bhasha's time. So maybe once she's done, I'd respond to Anand's question about how challenging it's been for us as journalists. Thank you.
Thank you, Anisha. I'm going to also already right away throw another question to you from the audience. We can come back to it later.
Sure.
It's kind of connected, but the question basically is, what was the most challenging experience for you in these months?
Happy to answer
I wanted to, before I hand this over to Bhasha Singh, I wanted to quickly flag 2 or 3 issues. And I would like to hear both you and Bhasha respond to that. One is, I think one of the senses that we've been getting from across different states is that in the first phase of the lockdown, one thing that all state governments realized is that their revenue had fallen down to almost 1/10 of what it normally is. Now that basically means that state governments are under tremendous pressure. And if the onus of managing this falls onto them, then they are more likely to believe in the herd immunity theory, because that's the only way in which you can actually tell yourself that it's okay to open up the lockdown, right? And I think a lot of that kind of stuff has happened, except that we haven't heard a lot of stories about it. The second thing I think that we haven't really discussed enough in the public domain is that while this whole experience has cracked open the problems with our public health infrastructures, one of the big challenges actually has been the staffing of our existing and available infrastructures. So when you see a large number of dead bodies in the mortuaries, it's partly because there's nobody to move the bodies, right? It's just that you have a lot of postgraduate students managing the ICU with no nursing staff, with no class 4 employees, with no ward boys, with no senior doctors being able to come in because they are themselves at risk, right? So you have a lot of young doctors who are working their 24-hour, 48-hour shifts constantly. And this, I think, has been the case across many different hospitals. So when we say that, we don't have enough infrastructure, partly what we mean is that we actually have infrastructure, but we don't have someone to run it. And I think that has been a very big challenge for us here. The third issue, which I think has been a very big concern for us, and this partly has to do, speaks to that story about Srikakulam cases going up. Srikakulam is a district from where a large number of migrant workers go out for construction work to different places, right? Like it's like Odisha in the Ganjam district in Odisha. You have a large number of migrant workers returning, and then you see a surge in the infections. So one of the things that both Telangana and Andhra have been very concerned about is not so much about people leaving us. People want to go back, let them go back. we are concerned more about people coming back into our state, because those could be infection carriers. So we basically, it's like we set up a one-way valve where we are saying that we will not let people come in to our state. If people want to go out, they're most welcome to leave. That's something that we have done. And I don't know how this is played out in different states, right? So with that, I just want to quickly hand this over to Bhasha Singh. Bhasha ji, the floor is yours.
I think it's, you're able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks, Anand, and thanks, Anisha, for bringing a lot of ground experiences. As far as how I see and about the ground reports relating to COVID-19, what I have experienced right now when we are talking in July, when the whole thing started, I think the most difficult time was that how we are going to see different communities. My focus was, and my interest was, to see how the communities who are either being treated as a corona warriors, in which condition they are, how they are responding to it, and being in Delhi, because it started with a communal angle. So I started my reporting from the ground, how the whole communal agenda, the Tablighi thing, they started pouring into it, and it was very deliberate. And as because later I traveled to UP and some parts of Bihar, and I have seen across that the way they wanted one enemy, as a Muslims as an enemy, as a they are the carriers, they are the people who are spreading. So the state was very deliberate and very successful in making this crisis as a communal divide. It was there. It was there while I was traveling towards UP, while talking to the villagers, talking to the youngsters. So their propaganda from the different TV channels, from the different WhatsApp group, they were able to communalize the corona. It was first success of the state. And because when we are talking of the ground reports, when we are talking about this crisis, as PM says that this आपदा को एक अवसर में बदलना है. This crisis is an opportunity. He talks in a different terms of Atmanirbhar Bharat to different things, but this आपदा को अवसर में बदलने का first thing they did was to have one enemy, because they were not prepared. They were having many lacunas at the ground to build up the health system, different structures which were supposed to be built up at that time, they were not there. So the communal angle was very strong, and I interviewed in Delhi also many residents, those who started beating, alienating the Muslim vendors, be it the vegetable vendor, be it the milk, anywhere. So that was my first, it was a very shocking experience for me, because I'm in journalism for more than 2 decades. And it has been a different thing, but being in a corona crisis, seeing that this communal divide is a very strong divide, and you talk to a doctor, you talk to and especially the middle class, the way they have responded to this communal agenda was a horrifying experience for me. So my expose started like this, that how this communal agenda, the Indian state, and especially the Modi government, be it the Yogi government, or be it in Delhi, it was across. And the way it was briefed also in many of the press conferences, the Tablighi, the spread through the Tablighi has been briefed separately. So that was my first expose, that how the communal agenda is taking place, and it has well penetrated to the ground. And second, I started doing some stories about the Safai Karmcharis, about the people who are cleaning, be it they are the regular employees, be they are on the contract. And while I was doing the interviews with them, So, initially everybody was talking that they are Corona warriors. They are the people who are going to save. And from Delhi to across, wherever I had a dialogue with them, in the UP, in Haryana, in Punjab, even in Hyderabad, even in Chennai, everywhere the story was the same. Nobody was ready to talk about them, report about them. There was no safety gear. Still, they don't have any safety gears. Still, there is no PPE kit. Only when the LNJP hospital here in Delhi, when 17 of the Safai Karamcharis openly said that they don't want to continue because their life is under danger, only then that become a little issue also. And they were not paid also. Their salary was, for 2 months, they were not paid during the Corona crisis. And they were very angry about it. And the third thing was about the nurses, because there was a lot of things coming out that what the government is doing about these warriors, and doctors are given this, and nurses have been provided. But when the nurses came openly, I interviewed them in the AIIMS and in other hospitals also, and their cases and their agony and their whole struggle was so pathetic, because not a single government, not a single institute was ready to hear about them. They are still working in a very horrifying conditions. They are threatened in one of the hospital. When we reported, immediately the police was called there, and the administration said that they will be shunted out if they go to the media. So what I want to say that it's very, this Corona crisis is not only a test case for the democracy. It's also a very test case for the media also, because as all of you you must have discussed also, and it has been many times it has been said also, that before the lockdown, the way Prime Minister Narendra Modi briefed the media owners, the editors, how to report about it. He had that video conference before the lockdown, how to report positively about it. And that was, that's still going on in a very subtle way in the major media houses. Only it was when the migrant workers started coming out, going back to their home, only then different kind of narration started. Otherwise, till the Tablighi, till that time, only one side of narration in major of the media houses, newspapers, TV channels. One set of propaganda was going on, and the ground report was also designed. There were very less ground reports. The journalists were not given proper cover, not given the encouragement, because major cuts in the salary and the jobs happened in the same Corona time. When we are talking of this period, many of our friends, they lost the job. So very less that kind of a reporting from the TV channels, from the media houses. Many editions were also closed. So what I found that while talking, if you are talking about, and third community which I visited was the leprosy colonies, how they are able to survive. In Delhi there are, and when I went there, so there was they were unseen. All these communities are completely unseen. They were not heard by the government, by the authorities. No relief has been reached to them. What was very strange, that in the Valmiki Bastis also, there was no reporting. There was no one to talk about these Safai Karamcharis. Can you imagine in All India Institute of AIIMS, the sanitation, the person who was heading the sanitation, he died of Corona. And when I went and had a word with the whole team there, they were so afraid. They were not ready to talk on the camera. Then they told that it's so difficult because we are not getting a nice quality PPE. We are not getting that kind of protection. And one thing which is across the country, that all the sanitation workers, were not given that kind of facilities. They were forced to go back. They were working in the COVID patients, and they were not given any facility to stay back in the hospital or in the hotels as the facility was given to the doctors. So there's a huge fear among all the sanitation workers across the country, that I can say for sure, that the kind of discrimination, the way the caste operated during this corona time, still it is operating. That's a very horrifying thing. So, and very less has been said about it. And at the same time, when we talk about the migrant workers, I traveled from here to UP and some other parts of the Bihar. So, what was very strange thing that the other kind of reports which were coming out, we were just talking that how long they are going to walk up, scene of, you can say ki dukh ho raha hai, gussa chad raha hai. Many these kind of narrations, life stories have come. But if you go for the detailed follow-up stories were very less, because the journalists were not giving that kind of a cover also. And secondly, nobody was ready to publish. So the pressure from the social media, from the websites, from the different kind of media, when they started covering about it, so a lot of things started coming out. And right now I am in Delhi, and I know that thousands of the small units are closed. The people are still facing a very different kind of struggle for their livelihood, but very less is reported. And the third thing which was very disturbing, as Anisha was telling about the Delhi, I reported when there was because there was a huge mismanagement, but Anant is saying that's right, that we never paid that who is going to clean, who is going to take the bodies, dead bodies. And there was no system. There's in fact no system, basically. There's no system. You go to LNGP, it's a horrifying thing. And especially the minority has a fear, and their fear is well-based. There are more than 20 stories I had where the dead bodies were mixed in Delhi. They were not able to cremate their father. They were not able to cremate their brother. Wife died of the shock. There's a story at least from the Delhi 6, the Jama Masjid side. So the wife died of the shock, but she was not able to see even the dead body here. So all these things were happening. Some of these stories and all the deaths, definitely we lost that journalist also, who was reporting about that how the Delhi government was fudging up the data. He committed suicide, and his suicide was also a tragic thing which happened in Delhi, in the national capital. But few of the journalists were raising this issue because we were continuously finding that dead bodies are lying up, be it in Punjabi Iqbal, be in all the kind of Nigambodh Ghat. Everywhere there was a queue, and first time we have seen this queue. So this, I think this is also very important, that the way the governments were lying, and they are still lying about the data. You don't know, because being a journalist, I don't have any independent authority to check the data. How I'm going to check that how many people died? Only I'm going to cross-check from the crematorium, from the different bodies there. But the government was in complete denial, be it Delhi government, be it the Pradesh government. And that was very astonishing part. And the government and the authorities were very threatening also. I just want to share one experience. I went to Uttar Pradesh, Lucknow. When the whole migration was happening, I reached to Lucknow. And at the same time, I came to know that some Dalit young boys were beaten by a dominant caste people. And that happened in the national capital of Uttar Pradesh. And it was in the city, near the PGI. Then I started searching on the Google that whether this news is okay or not, because I belong to Lucknow. So I just called some of the friends. Not a single line news was published, and it was 4 days that incident has happened. Then I went to that area, and to my, it was really I was not able to locate that how it is possible that not a single media person reported on this atrocity which is happening at the time of Corona, where two young boys, both from the Dalit community, were beaten by a Brahmin dominant caste person. The Brahmin family made the video. They made the video, they made it viral, and there was no action. And but there were many eyewitnesses which I was able to find in the village, and they were ready to speak on the camera, and I reported that story in the NewsClick. And while returning, I just thought to check with the local authorities, with the police, and the tone was so threatening. You just come here, we'll give you the real data. Madam, aa jao aap. आपको हम बताते हैं क्या हुआ है. So this was the tone, and that tone continued till I reached back to Delhi. That publish mat karna, publish karna to humse pooch lena. And because I called from my driver's number, so they were continuously calling them. And when I about this incident, those boys who were beaten, whose videos are there, photos are there, they were assaulted, they were head shave, and they have written casteist abuse on the head. There was a jute ki mala pehnai, everything they did, and they were in the jail. And I dead sure that they are still in the jail. So that kind of a coverage also has happened in a very strange way, the atrocities, because I want to mention that during the Corona crisis, huge atrocities have happened, huge atrocities. And especially in Uttar Pradesh, the kind of atrocity, the kind of threat on the Muslims and on the Dalits have happened. And all went underreported, or very minimum reporting has happened on them, because everybody wants to have a different kind of Corona-linked story only. So no other story, only the Corona, and that too from a different perspective. And many of our friends who have reported, who have challenged the state, be it in Uttar Pradesh, be it in Delhi or in Himachal Pradesh, in Gujarat, I did a story on this also. Those journalists have been booked, those who were doing a fearless work. Their publications were not ready to publish. I know in Gujarat, I know in Himachal Pradesh, who were reporting and challenging the false data and false claims of the government. But they were booked under, still there are cases against many of these journalists who are very young and very energetic. And at the same time, but I find that it was a very different kind of a challenge when you talk challenging the myths which the government has created around the Corona from the ground. While I was traveling in Lucknow, I was able to find that there is no government for the migrant worker, no support from the government has come. Wherever the villagers are, they came out openly with the food, with the stuff, and they were not afraid. That was a very positive thing which I felt first time, the way India is working to help these migrant workers. And that's why more than 1 crore, the government data says in the Supreme Court, they said that 1 crore reached back to the home. If we just stick to that data only, definitely their number is much more than that. But they were able to survive. I have seen myself the way villagers have come together. They were just giving some water, some food, they were cooking there. And all were not from a very rich background, especially in this area of Ghaziabad and all that when we started. Huge number of Muslim youngsters. They were just selling they were just distributing the rice, water. And when I interviewed 2 of them, they were saying that it's very difficult when they see and they find that we are Muslims. I say that whether they are a little reluctant to take anything from you. So they say that in this Corona, they have spread so much hatred against us that even when we are giving the rice, they were giving the plain rice. And then they said that tomorrow we are going to bring roti and sabji. Because with the rice, they are a little afraid that it may have some biryani or may have some non-veg. So that was a very different kind of experience for me when I interviewed all these youngsters who were coming out openly, helping these fellow Indian citizens. And one last thing which I feel that's important, and it was reported, but not the way it should have been. The kind of gender violence happened during this Corona time, because a lot of cases has happened. And I have interviewed many of them. I tried to report on them. But you see the whole police administration when we went. Now, right now when we are talking, we know what happened in Araria, Bihar. And the way the gang rape survivor was put behind the bar, and the two fellow supporters working in an NGO who came to support her, are still under the jail. But the entire administration, you find, the entire administration was so hostile when the woman was going to have a complaint again on the domestic violence. Immediately I heard in 2 cases where the police is saying, Corona ke samay bhi tumko marpeet ki padi hui hai. So still you are, during the time of Corona, you're talking about marpitai, ye sab to chalta rehta hai. So what I had a feeling that from top to bottom, wherever you find that the state was completely apathetic, they were full of lies, they were spreading rumors like anything, because this is a horrible time for the media. Whatever for the judiciary, whatever for the politics, I don't bother about it. But for the media, the Corona crisis has exposed us like anything. We were the hate mongers. We were the myth tellers. We were just propagating all the time that thali baja ke kaam chal jayega, diya jala ke kaam chal jayega. We were having the narrations around it, narrations and narrations around it. And it was the media in general. Definitely there are exceptions. But if you talk about the mass media, which is going and which is at our home, which is the people are reaching and watching and reading, during the Corona crisis, from the ground report to the next level, from the editorial level, how much we can be a hate monger, how much casteist we can be, and how much we can bow down to the masters. They just ask. And one more thing I want to say, that I did 2 stories on this, that how the state, how the media was reporting on the rumors. First time I have heard that the police, be it Uttar Pradesh police, be it Maharashtra police, coming out openly saying, taking the names of the channels and the newspapers, that please, this is a fake news. Please don't publish it. This is not, the reality is not this. So I think this has never happened before. That the police is saying, police is coming out openly that we will file an FIR against you, or even the Uttar Pradesh police. That was a strange thing for me. They came out openly with the newspaper's name, with the channel's name, that they are spreading fake news. So the Corona period must be remembered, that how much you can manipulate Indian media. And at the same time, there were fearless journalists who were working in different channels at the individual capacities also. People have done wonderful work. From the websites, they have done wonderful work. They have taken a risk. Many of our friends got Corona. Many of our friends got a notice from the police. They were threatened. We get so many calls from different numbers for one or single report. I have never received so many. But first time. So I think this divide, that how the media is looking this crisis, and how much the media has gone away from our ethical basic values also should be remembered. And lastly, I think I will always remember this period. The kind of ground reports should have been done by the big groups, be it Hindu, be it Times of India, name it, all the TV channels. They have utterly missed the Indian democracy. They have not focused. They were much more worried how just to do the retrenchment. This period, maximum journalists have lost their jobs. That's the biggest challenge, because if you don't have journalists who are ready to go, who are ready to report, then how the reality will come? And even those journalists who are going, I know many journalists in Uttar Pradesh who are reporting. We know a journalist who has reported in Jan Sandesh Times from the Prime Minister constituency. I also reported on that incident later, where a Musahar community kids are eating grass, and he's still under bar. We know about the Supriya from the Scroll, who reported from the Prime Minister constituency, and his FIR on her. So this is a very mixed, because people went out taking the risk. Many went out, and they tried to report. Many got a space, and many of my friends who were not, whose publication were not ready to publish, they started doing the Facebook lives. They were reporting on the Twitter. They were putting a small videos. So I think this is a very mixed kind of feeling, which I wanted to share here.
Thank you, Bhasha. I mean, it's such an illuminating story that you've told, and I'm calling it illuminating because, you know, when we started actually distributing food, one of the things that I got reminded of is the way in which Charles Dickens describes London, right? And there was a moment in which he opens his description with saying that this is the best of the times, this is the worst of the times. And I think what we have seen is enormous courage and generosity come out. And we've also seen the worst of our human character on display. We have seen the worst of greed during the same time. And I think if I were to pick one thread in all that you were saying, it is that the discrimination, the way in which we have been inflicting violence on people all through, during this crisis, in many ways, it has actually become exacerbated simply because nobody is even looking at it. Nobody is even pointing out this is happening. Two, also because it got entangled with other narratives, right? So you're no longer talking about just a Muslim. You're talking about the Muslim body as the one that actually spreads disease. And that makes a huge difference to the way in which you can discriminate against them, right? And I think that kind of stigmatizing bodies to be able to unleash older regimes of violence was what actually happened in many, many instances. And that opens up very serious questions about what do we have here that can actually be recouped for the future, right? Is there anything at all here that we can pick up and say, while everything else collapses, 1, 2, 3 things, these are the things that we can pick up and say, isko leke hum aage chal sakte hain, right? From isi raakh mein se, kaun si aisi cheez hai jisko hum haath mein lekar ke keh sakte hain ki aage wala rasta humko ye wali mashal se mil jayega, right? That is what I think will be really useful to think about. Anisha and Bhasha, I want now to go back to the questions from the audience. I don't know if you are able to see the questions. If you are not, I can read them out for you. In any case, I will read them out. Yeah, there are two, actually they're appearing in two different forums, and that's why it'll probably be easier if I read them out. Sure. Stop me when you think that you have too many questions on your plate. So the first one, as I said, was for Anisha, which asks Anisha to tell what is the toughest experience in reporting COVID. Mm-hmm. Under-reporting of deaths has become a common trend across many Indian states. How do we handle this? And this, I think, is one pattern which repeats in a number of questions, which is that how do we actually try and figure out what to make of this problem with data, right? We know that data has been fudged, data has been put out in very vague forms. So how do we make sense of all of this? The government's response to challenges posed by coronavirus outbreak was unplanned and not adequate. Policies were taken to combat the situation. Do you think that this is because the lack of good health, public health facilities to meet the demand which created the panic, or was it also an administrative error? I mean, is this a long-term policy failure, or is it just in the execution at this point of time? I mean, is it possible that people just panicked and then screwed up, or is it something much more structural? Bhasha, there are 2-3 questions for you, which I think it'll be good if you can respond to. One is, can you tell us a little bit more about the condition of women in quarantine centers? Are they even safe in places like that? Two, it seems like corona is actually a treatable disease with much lesser chances of death than what you've been imagining all along. Where do you think is our big failure? Where do you think is the fault with the Indian experience? Was the government's response to the pandemic in India merely political? I mean, could they have actually dealt with this as a health problem rather than as a political opportunity? You know, in some sense, the question I think is basically that अब हम कह रहे हैं कि ये आपदा नहीं अवसर है, तो कौन सा अवसर है ये? Is this a political अवसर or is this something else, right? So if you can pick up these questions, then there's another round of questions we can come back to after that. Yeah?
Sure. Bhasha, would you like to go first or should I?
Yeah, you start, Anisha.
Okay, sure. So first I'd begin with, I think I was asked about what was my most challenging assignment. Is that right? Because I can't
Yes.
see that. Yeah, this I think would be, to be honest, I think each report that you do brings its own set of challenges, as Bhasha pointed out, because I think something that she very appropriately pointed out is that there are a lot of follow-ups. Anyway, when you do a story which is critical of a government's performance, you tend to get calls which can be quite threatening. But if I had to point to something specific, I think this would be something which would be to do with more of the physical aspect when I was on this assignment. This was when I visited a COVID care center in a medical college in Andhra Pradesh in Vijayawada. And that's the first time that I actually got into a PPE kit. Hats off. I don't know. And I think I want to take this opportunity to salute all the health workers, class 4 employees, sanitation workers who do it day in and day out. It's difficult. It's a very tough job out there. I think I just wore it for about half an hour to 40 minutes. I was advised to do that by the nurse and the senior doctor there, saying that, it could, because there were patients with mild symptoms. And I did want to speak to them to understand what kind of experience it was at a COVID care center. So while I found it tough to do it for just about half an hour to 40 minutes, I don't know how these people do it back to back for 8 hours without a single break to use the washroom, to eat. I mean, forget anything else. It's just difficult to breathe. Calling it suffocation is an understatement. You can't breathe. It's like you're being trapped out there, someone's choking you. And so I have to say that I earned there was a newfound respect for all these people who do it day in, day out. So I think that for me was very, very challenging in terms of an assignment that I'll perhaps never forget. Other than that, I think I'd just like to add briefly to this, which would perhaps answer a portion of Anant, your question as well, which is mental health. I think overall, it's been a challenging time for us. And I don't mean to sound like a victim, but I feel it's important to acknowledge it at the same time in terms of, there is an emotional burnout that you feel at the end of the day. And I don't want to shy away from admitting that. There are days you have sleepless nights because I think now I'm way more confident or open about stepping out. But initially, you are sort of scared at the end of the day. All of us want to live, and that you're taking that. Let's be honest, we're no warriors saying that, it's a very easy thing to do. So I remember I felt that when we traveled by one of the special trains to Telangana from Delhi because the flights hadn't begun when I was asked to go for this assignment by my editor. And I remember him calling me in his cabin and he's like, Anisha, you'll have to travel by the special train. And is it okay? And it took me a couple of seconds, but I think at that point, I just knew that if I don't do this, I'm probably going to regret it. So it's okay. So yeah, it does. I mean, besides the fact that you're scared, also I think you are seeing so much for yourself and you're stepping out daily in the field that it takes a toll on your mental health as well, in terms of you don't know how long this is going to last. Are you going to be all right? You might have to get tested. So my family is actually back in Chandigarh, and I've not been able to see them in 5 months now. So and even if I want to go visit them, I need to quarantine. I mean, there's a turmoil that we're all also going through, and we're as human as one can be, in terms of ensuring that while we're putting ourselves at risk, we don't want to put our family members at risk as well. So I think emotionally it does take a toll on you, because anyway it's a tough time, but it also adds to the amount that you're seeing every day. At the same time, I must add that it also makes you feel very grateful and blessed, because you still have a roof to stay under, which I think these times made me realize. So overall, yeah, I think it's been challenging in that sense. But yeah, I think we're trying to cope as we proceed. Talking about the question on underreported deaths. So yes, that's absolutely right. I think while some of us have tried to shed light on particular states, it's happening across the country. And like Bhasha also pointed out early, it's only a matter of time when this will actually come out. I mean, even I am really skeptical whether there's actually any state or UT out there which is doing this in a very transparent manner. If you ask me what's the solution to this, again, I don't have a single-handed solution to offer, but I do think that the center needs to step in, and there needs to be some sort of uniform protocol for that matter. Because I think more amount of accountability needs to come in, because sadly, from what I've noticed, at least the states that I've reported on, the focus is more on ensuring that something does not get published instead of damage control, instead of introspecting that what's going wrong. I remember the government officials in Delhi took out a statement, and there was a presser after I did that story saying that, there's no reason why we'll underreport deaths. We're as concerned. It's easy to make sweeping statements like that, but are you looking into it before responding to a story? I mean, are you actually trying to find a constructive solution? So I think that's why I say the center, because I don't know how each state will deal with it. So I wish the center stepped in, and there needs to be a death audit committee in every state. Even today, I think Delhi has it, Telangana still doesn't. And why I know that, because, I was reporting on this very recently. Andhra is now, of course, auditing as well. Perhaps Bhasha will be able to shed light on UP and Bihar since she's traveled there. So I think it's important to have an audit committee for every state so that data can be shared. Because right now, if you ask them, they don't even have data to share with you. They only have that particular health bulletin, which is shared every evening. And I'm sorry, that's exactly what we're questioning, because the figures aren't being put out in a transparent manner. So I personally feel that some uniform protocol needs to come in, and the center needs to step in before there's an outburst sooner or later. Moving on, this is about, Delhi's performance, or whether lack of public health facilities was the key reason, whether it was an administrative error, or I think there was one more point that one of the attendees here added. And I personally think it's a combination of all three. I won't say Delhi, to be honest, actually had limited health facilities. Delhi as a national capital has numerous, probably the maximum number of government hospitals, even private hospitals. So I don't think we were short of facilities, but it was again management. And as Anant very adequately pointed out, and I'd like to add to that, even in terms of Telangana, that I think shortage of resources and health workers was also a concern, because we've seen the junior doctors and interns turn out in large numbers, as opposed to the senior doctors, because they've been worried about their age. So I think more than the institutes themselves, it's a lot to do with the number of health workers and also the condition of the health infrastructure. There's a difference between the quantity and the number of institutes as opposed to the condition and how they're being maintained. So I think that's also something that needs to be looked at. If a building is not strong or is not able to take in something, then that's too bad. That needs to be looked at. That doesn't mean that a government hospital does not exist in an area. So I think as a country, we need to focus on health more proactively has been one of the biggest learnings from what I'll understand. I think that basically sums it up.
Yeah, thank you. Bhasha?
Yeah. So the first thing, that whether women in the quarantine are safe or not. Women in the quarantine are safe or not is directly linked the way the society, we are safe in the society. And we have some cases where there were sexual violence on the women who were in the quarantine. And the way the quarantine has been designed initially, the reports from the UP and from the Bihar were very threatening. And we have one friend also who was a freelancer, and she was a cultural activist, and she was put in a quarantine. It was a little far from her place in Uttar Pradesh. And from there, she was continuously giving a very scary kind of messages. And we all got afraid, and everybody tried to reach her out. And when we were able to communicate to that place, so just she was there in the entire school building. And they used to lock her from outside and go away. And it was really, so these are the few cases which we came to know, but we have a few more cases which have come, which are saying that a lot of sensitivity towards the women, towards the girls, especially towards the kids, which is right now missing. And the bigger question is about that, whether the political opportunity, Rajnitik Avsar ke taur par. So during this quarantine period, your question has many answers. We have the Madhya Pradesh government due to Corona. We have now the Rajasthan, and I don't know what other states are left. But, and the Bihar. I think the biggest expose of the political greediness is the Bihar. The way it has spread in Bihar, that's a learning lesson. The way 75 BJP members from Patna got Corona positive because they were preparing for the virtual rallies. We know one MLC has died because he was busy for the meeting. And there is a campaign from CPI-ML Liberation asking that please stop the election thing now because people are dying. And I know also one of my personal acquaintance who died in Bihar. He was a teacher, he was a principal of a government school, and he was asked to train the teachers from the Hyderabad who came for this election training duty, and he died of Corona. And there's a huge mess. So what I want to say that definitely the way the government should have dealt this crisis, the way we have reached to the number 3 globally. And there is a huge link between it because basically the lockdown, for what the lockdown was meant, the way lockdown was implemented, as Anand was talking that how it has moved to this place. So I think that that's very crucial thing that the government should have done it in a proper way with the focus on the health. The way Delhi reacted later, the way the beds were available, the way the testing were done instead of denial. When we are talking, we know from the Uttar Pradesh, the DMs are shifted. The moment your number raises, the DM is out. The CMO is out. Why? Because they have to prepare for 5th August. The great Ram Mandir thing is going to happen. So the whole machinery in the Uttar Pradesh is busy for the Ram temple. They're not worried about the Corona. Bihar is busy with the elections. Rajasthan, they are trying to put for the new government. Madhya Pradesh, they did for a different government. So this all shows the priority of the Modi regime. What I want to say very clearly and openly, that the way they have dealt with this crisis shows their anti-people agenda. They don't want to, you have not given, you have discriminated with the Safai Karamcharis. One reason you give. Why the health insurance is different for a doctor and for a Safai Karamchari and for the nurse. All are fighting with the corona. So all the things which Anand आप सही कह रहे थे कि जो हमारे समाज की गंदगियां थी वो बिल्कुल बेपर्दा हो गई हैं, वो बिल्कुल उजागर हो गई हैं. जितनी हमारे सिस्टम की जो गड़बड़ियां, सुप्रीम कोर्ट, the way it happened, वहां पे आप सुप्रीम कोर्ट is saying that उनको खाना तो मिल रहा है, तुमको वापस क्यों जाना, उनको पैसा क्यों देना, why you want to give money to them? So how much we can be anti-poor. The poor was, we live in Delhi. All the apartments close the door for the workers, for the people who are coming to as a support structure. They lost their job because we think that the poor is going to have the corona. Only the corona thing is, I think, the best part, that the rich also got afraid. The political parties also got afraid that they can get the corona. Otherwise, they could have not done even this much. So this is a very big issue, I think, right now when we are talking, we are end of July. The whole process started in March. We started also with the 500 cases and where we landed there. How much PPE kit? We have a Gujarat thing. We always miss the Gujarat. Horrible experiences of hiding the facts. Horrible experiences of the scams, ventilator scam, PPE scam, everything came out during this period. So that shows that the whole agenda was not to protect, and this you could have done if you could have focused on the public health system. You could have helped the doctors, nurses, ward boys, the people who are working in the mortuaries. You have an interview with the mortuary person. You will be horrified how that fellow is working. How many of them have got corona in Delhi? There are so many stories lying around us, but we are not ready to just move with them. So that I 100% agree that this crisis कायदे से डील करना चाहिए था, हेल्थ क्राइसिस के तौर पे देखना चाहिए था, इसे अवसर के तौर पे नहीं देखना चाहिए था. But the irony is that still the government from the center to the rest of the places, they are just seeing it as an opportunity. Otherwise, the national media can't propagate 24/7 the 5th August thing, that India is going to have a Ram Mandir Shila Pujan, Bhumi Pujan. That can't be a national news. So, and you will see that in coming next week, this will be the major news, how it is going to be built up, what is going to be spent, from where the money is going to come, how auspicious it is. So this is how the whole diction has been converted. When we want the hatred, we bring that hatred. When we want a Hindu Rashtra, we bring a Ram Mandir thing. When we want a hatred, we bring the China virus and the China thing. So that I want to say very openly, Anant, that they have used this system, this crisis for their political agenda. And that's why the Indian citizen, are in a miserable condition. Nobody is held accountable. We can't ask the question. There is no press conferences. You can't challenge a single minister. The minister MOS here, Arjun Ram Meghwal, is propagating a papad. Can you imagine? Bhabhi ji ka papad. You eat that papad and you will have a corona thing. You will go away and immunity will increase. So this is the label the government, and nobody is asking him, shut your mouth. Nobody is saying that, no, this is a false information. So much superstition is being spread, be it Ramdev, be it this Bhabhi ji ka papad. The way media has propagated this Ramdev thing. So, and now this whole Indian thing, I'm dead sure on 15th August, the great Prime Minister is going to announce that India is the first one to bring the vaccine, and we will be hailing that. So this, the way, not only the fake news, this is, I'm saying, that different kind of narrative has been built up during this period. And the irony is that you feel very helpless. As a journalist, I feel very helpless many times, that I know that this papad is not going to have a corona thing, but you are watching it and you can't, I can't
Thank you, Bhashaji. Masood, do we have for 5 more minutes?
Yes.
Okay, so if I have 5 more minutes, I just want to put one question which actually came up fairly early on in the conversation from Sangamitra ji. And this is a question for both the panelists, Anisha and Bhasha. It looks like the whole approach has been framed within the legal structure of disaster management, right? And that approach of dealing with this as disaster management, rather than as, let's say, interstate migrant workers and whatever approaches might be available for that, or some other legal framework, or maybe even come up with a framework that is a lot more humane than, harking back to some kind of a colonial epidemiological law, or to a very draconian disaster management approach in which you can actually tell newspapers what to publish or not to publish, right? What do you think has happened? I mean, is there any way in which we can imagine some other legal framework or some other administrative political approach that could have dealt with this better than what we have done until now? It's a question to both of you, and if you have noticed, can you all hear me? Yeah, it's a question to both of you, and if you have noticed, I'm kind of asking you to give me something to hang my hopes on. Please, whoever wants to go ahead. Bhasha, you want to start?
Yeah. Basically, are you able to hear me? Yeah,
Yes.
There was some disturbance from my side. Yeah. Basically, what I feel that, as I said in my earlier presentation also, that people who are suffering, they are able to understand and they are connecting with each other. So that's the biggest hope, where I feel that we, the people of India, our constitution preamble reads, that there the hope lies that during this crisis also, whatever we say, they came out openly to save the other human being. And there was very less discrimination on the basis of the caste and the religion, which I was able to find. So first thing, the hope lies with the people, what I feel, that in this utter crisis, where everybody was even afraid, and especially the middle class was afraid even to come out openly, meet anyone or help anyone, at that time, the working class, the toiling people of this country, they came out openly, at least to move. They want to go back to their places. So this is one of the positive things. And secondly, what I feel that very important thing has happened, कि जितनी भी हमारी गंदगी दिमाग की थी या सिस्टम की थी, whatever was there, that has come very open. So now you know that how you are going to work. We tried our best in these 3 months to build up some enemies. We had the Tablighi, but still you find that that has withered away. Whatever the hate mongering has happened, it was not able to sustain more than 15 days to 1 month. Finally, they have to find one more enemy. The other enemy became a migrant labor. But that also was not able to continue. So that shows that this life of the hate mongers on one issue is not a lasting one. It goes away. And the best thing I feel, that during this so much of pressure also, so much of crisis, so much of threat also, people were ready to speak truth, report truth, even risking their life. They were ready to go, they reported. Their publications were not ready to print, but still they reported. They went on the social media. There was a huge pressure which was, and new measures were evolved also. We are discussing on a webinar. Many webinars are going on. And so we are trying to evolve with the present situation कि हम क्या कुछ नया कर सकते हैं, हम कैसे जिंदा रह सकते हैं, क्योंकि basically this is a question of the survival. Next 6 months are going to be a question of survival of this democracy and of the poor of this country, be it the migrant worker, be it as a journalist, be it as intellectual, whether you are going to be behind the bar or you are going to sit like this and have a talk. So I think now a section is being pushed across the wall. So आपके पास option नहीं है. You have to talk, you have to write, and there are people who are listening. Initially, it was looking like that nobody is there, but at that time also I found that whoever is speaking, they are getting audience, they are being heard. People want to listen the truth. Whatever your limited resources are, we have to utilize those resources. Whatever we can speak, we can write, we can expose. So I think this fight is going to be much more tough in coming days. But we don't have any other option but to be in this fight, to stand beside the truth and to connect with the reality. Reality is also very strange now, because the kind of unemployment, the kind of hunger is spread across. So what Anant is going to do, what Bhasha is going to do, what Anisha is going to do, what we are going to do. We are going to bring all these things which we have been doing before. But earlier it was little easy because we have the courts, we have the press council, we have the editors guild. But right now we have to evolve a new means also, the way the migrant workers have evolved their way. More than 1 crore Indian citizen boycotted. That was a civil disobedience from their side, from that regime. Can you imagine the way the police was there, the way the whole administration was लाठी चलाओ, गोली चलाओ, सब कुछ कर रहा था, but they were not ready to listen. So I think this is the only hope which I feel. And as a journalist, I feel that we have lot of things to do, lot of things to report, and बहुत ज़्यादा दिल्ली और बड़े शहरों से बाहर निकल के काम करने की भी बहुत ज़रूरत है.
Thank you, Bhasha. Anisha, do you want me to repeat the question? Anisha, can you hear me? Anisha, are you here? Can you hear me? Masood, can you check if Anisha is here?
Yeah, she's here, but I think there is some issue with connectivity. Let me check.
Okay. She logged back in for a moment.
Yeah. Just a minute.
Bhasha ji, are you in Delhi right now?
Yeah, I'm in Delhi. No, not in Delhi. I'm just moving towards Delhi. Yeah. I just missed the time. I thought that 6:30, so I thought that by the time I will reach Delhi. So I just stopped on the way. Yeah.
Yeah, the number of people who have actually left Hyderabad and not being able to come back. They want to come back. They can't quite figure out what to do. It's quite a bizarre situation.
Yeah.
Keep getting calls.
I think same here. And the other problem I feel that right now, people are also not able to find out that how much risk they can take. That at one go, I find that Delhi was completely, markets were deserted, everything. The moment the stories started coming up that, okay, there is no community transmission, now the numbers are getting less. And definitely people need to have some kind of a business.
Yeah.
So you will find that the market again started flooding. So that also makes a very strange thing, because finally how we are going to respond to this crisis, the government are changing so fast. One day
Yeah.
they will come out with one thing, and in Uttar Pradesh, it's so strange that on the weekend there is a lockdown, as if only on the weekend the corona is going to spread. And even as a journalist also, if you travel, you can be fined. You have to have a fight with them, even in the Noida, Greater Noida. So that scene has also become very interesting, because nobody knows that why on the Friday and Sunday, Saturday on Sunday, the lockdown is there. Why not on the
Basically a
rest of the
5-day
day?
week.
So basically, what I find that this is also tuning of the mind, tuning of the lifestyles, how much you can do, because you don't find that kind of a preparation at the level of health services or the testing, because testing is still very difficult in many of the places, especially in the Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Earlier it was in Delhi also. Many of the young journalists were saying that it's difficult to get tested, but now the Delhi has cope up with that.
Yeah.
But
No, I mean, slowly we have improved testing capacities. But one of the things that I'm hearing from doctors is that whether you do it through home quarantine or through some other means, essentially doctors are not panicking as much as they used to panic earlier. And they're saying that, somehow we are slowly figuring out how to manage the patient. And one of the interesting examples they're giving is that infection fatality ratios in dengue used to be very high 10, 15 years ago. Now it's not as if we actually invented any new medication for that. In fact, our intervention now in dengue cases is much lower than what it used to be earlier. But IFR is quite low. We're not seeing that many people actually dying because of that. And they're saying that this is because we have figured out how to treat the symptoms. And essentially, that's what they're all saying, that in Corona, the thing that we are slowly getting a handle on is that we are now able to manage the symptoms better. And if we can manage the symptoms better, then somehow the fatality is going to be much lower.
So
That's
Anant, can I take leave?
Anisha has joined.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Is Anisha here?
Yes.
Anisha, are you here? Can you hear me? No, she's not.
She is there, but her video is. She's connected.
Her video is also not working.
Okay.
Am I audible?
Anisha, I think we are audible now.
Okay. Is it?
Yes,
Can
you're
you see
visible
me?
too.
Am I audible? Okay. I'm sorry. I think
You are
there was
even
some
visible now.
connection issue. All right. Sorry for that.
That's okay. So you have the last word on this. And if you want me to give you the prompt, I will. The last question that I was asking, can you hear me now? She got disconnected again.
Yes, I'm back. I don't know what's wrong, even though it's showing the connection's fine. I'm sorry I missed the question.
No, Anisha, can you use your phone? It might be better through your phone.
I was trying to do it from the phone.
Yeah, I could hear that.
Try it side by side.
Are you in? Bhasha, do you have to leave, go somewhere after this?
I have yeah. Actually, I have to just drive a few kilometers.
To Delhi.
Yeah.
just give us 5 minutes.
Can I take? Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Just give us 5 minutes. Hopefully, Anisha will be back. If she doesn't, if she is in, then you can just say bye bye to her and then you can leave. Otherwise,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
5 minutes. Are you able to get her in?
Am I audible and visible now?
You are audible. Let me see if you are visible also. No, you're not. Yes, of course. Now you're visible and audible both.
Okay. I'll take your question quickly.
You've gone offline again.
I think there is an issue with connectivity, network issue.
Yeah, but why?
Again, it's back. I'm so sorry, but I'm trying from the phone as well. It's not happening. I have
So
no clue what's wrong.
please mute your video.
Sorry?
Mute your video.
If it's a bandwidth issue, it'll work better if you just mute your video.
Okay, I've done that.
Yeah, turn off your video, then the audio will be much better.
Right.
Yeah. And actually, if all the others also do that, it might help her. Okay, can you hear me now, Anisha?
Yes, I can. Yes.
So I'm going to repeat the question quickly for you. The question is,
Okay.
it appears that right from the beginning and to a large extent, this whole coronavirus issue has been
Sorry,
dealt with.
I'm not
You're
able to
hear
hear
me?
you properly. No.
Can you hear me now?
Hello, Anand.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I take leave? Actually, it's 7. Then
Yeah, I
it will
think
be
it's
little-
getting late.
Yeah.
You should leave now.
Yeah.
We'll wait
I
for a little longer and then see if it'll work. It doesn't
Yeah.
work. Then fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank
Am I
you.
audible
Thanks.
now?
Yes, Anisha, I can hear you.
I'm so sorry. I don't know. I've tried to log in afresh now. I don't know if it's any better.
It's much better.
Okay. Have I eaten into everyone's time? We can wind up. Otherwise, apologies.
No.
from
That's
my end.
not a problem at all. But the question I'm going to repeat to you is
Okay.
as follows.
Okay.
From day one, it appears that coronavirus issue has been dealt with within the framework of number 1, Disaster Management Act, number 2, Epidemiological Act. Basically, it's those two: a colonial act that controls social behavior during epidemics, and a more recent act which has to deal with natural calamities and disasters on a national scale. That's basically what we have done. That must have then had consequences for the way in which we manage the information, in which people felt obligated to report or not report or whatever. Do you think that there are other ways of doing this? Do you think that some of these legal frames could have been done better? Also, could our response to this have been a lot more humane? Is basically what everybody is feeling, and I'm asking this partly because one of the biggest mental health challenges is to having to deal with so much morbidity at so many levels, right? So, what is it that we can take hope in?
Is this for me?
Yes, Anisha.
I'm sorry again. I haven't been able to hear the entire question. I've just heard the morbidity bit. I haven't been able to hear what the entire question was.
The
Is
question.
it there somewhere? Do you want to read it from somewhere so that I don't make you keep repeating it?
Yes, you could actually. In the chat section, if you go to the top, you will find a question from Sangamitra Acharya. And the question actually refers to Combat COVID-19 National Disaster Management Act was invoked. What happens to it after May 21st? Can you see it?
I think she lost her connection.
Masood, do you think that we can actually do this as a separate question with her later and then edit it in?
Yes. I think.
Hmm?
I think you
That might
should
be
find out.
a good thing to do, no?
Yes.
Just get the video clip with her response and then edit it and put that into this.
Yeah, sure. We'll do it.
Yeah?
Sure, we'll do it.
Speak to her, because I mean, it'll be horrible if she feels bad that she was disconnected. I mean, this is part of the webinar life. Yeah?
Yes. Actually, she's not available on WhatsApp as well.
Yeah.
There's some
No, there must be some
connectivity
kind
issue.
of a data issue for her
Yes.
at home.
Yes.
So speak to her whenever you can. And
Yeah,
thank
sure.
you very much. Thanks everyone for organizing this. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.